says it's live.
Just see where it stands. That's his head. And that's Rob. Hey.
Just took a refresh.
You guys sang your sports director.
I called him.
What did you guys say? We don't know what task every year was.
Kara goes all at the sports angle. So.
Are we okay right here? Probably just to get some photos. I just want to make sure that.
Yeah, just thought about it today, the second round. Looks like
Just leave it now.
No, trash himself. I mean, he's all skunked up on the way.
Oh,
Road rush. Yeah. Anyway,
now they're contributing to the downfall of downtown City Hall by helping that building turn into a flight.
How far were you out?
It's remodeled.
Oh, we were just, this was from the Samson down to the
Remodeled.
yeah. And I said, well, he was working on it, so it was a big deal. We kind of went down.
Yeah.
Hey, Bree, it's Dave Cohen. I'm up on Doug at 4 for the 11 a.m. And then if you want to record a little early, I have some video I can feed in. Oh, you are? All right. Sounds good. I'll hang up. Bye.
A little tick because there was a trial I was covering, a cold case trial, where it makes pesticide, and I recommended that we go to it that day. To get the video of them walking in and out, whereas these kids,
Yeah.
we don't have that.
Well, we're just worried because
Like at the time of him, I think we found an old.
Yeah, so they're streaming me for the web. So I just grabbed it, cut away.
remember it. Yeah, exactly.
Some people otherwise, what I was going to do. But I'll just get. You can grab it too.
Oh, yeah.
There's also something like that.
Sure, if that's the right thing to do in a certain case, people would do that, but I think it's the police to say.
Yeah. We think we're ready with everyone. audio level?
Yeah.
No, about halfway. Mm.
Are you online or mic on here?
I have it on my.
Okay, that's what I meant. I must have my voice levels turned down.
Yeah.
I saw this.
You have there's a audio level down here
Oh, yeah.
that I found sometimes. You turn that up, that sometimes helps. I've done that where also I can hear it. Usually keep mine about 5 or 6.
Yeah, it's at 8 right now.
I booked a hotel room.
But it's probably something in my menu.
Yeah.
Oh, I was assuming you're the XLR,
Yeah.
you're the, SBI.
I should have to turn it on cable because mine would great.
Well, she might
I get as tight as well, I kind of, I guess, a little bit there, but
hotel.
it's dirty, I had a piece of gum stuck to it.
This was yesterday.
Some people are very fancy red dogs and to look up
The hot dog, yeah.
they'll flip mine upside down.
Somebody from our station just bought, into a carbon fiber ones at 2,700. I'm like, off the day.
Yeah, I would do that.
I didn't even do freelance stuff. Actually, I understand, because I do some freelance stuff, so I like once in a while. But
Oh, yeah.
I don't think I bought any new gear.
Yeah.
20.
All the gear just gets outdated so quick.
I still use a mirrorless camera that I haven't gotten in 2013. So it shoots 1080 just fine. So use that as a deep beat cam.
Yeah.
My memory is not as good as it used to be for stuff like this. So. What's that?
Okay, cool.
Steve Evans.
All right, perfect.
Doug London says.
Thanks, bye.
Still alive. Doug died this past year.
Are you on ND3? Gain at 15th Street. Kind of go for that green, so I tend to shoot the ND filter on and gain it. Going to like
good to go, Jim? Everyone else good?
Yes, thank you.
Everyone ready?
Hello, good morning. I am John Choi, the Ramsey County Attorney, and I want to thank all of you for being here today as we share an update, an important update on just the status of the review that we are conducting in relation to past cases handled by our former medical examiner, Dr. Michael McGee in Ramsey County. I really want to thank the people that are here today to also share in some of the information sharing with all of you and to our public. We're going to hear today, I'm going to give a quick little overview, and then you're going to hear from Prosecutor Center for Excellence. They are the organization that we have contracted with to help us conduct this very, very comprehensive review. You're also going to hear from the Attorney General's office to give an update on the work they're doing involving cases involving our former medical examiner, Dr. McGee. And then you'll also hear from the Great North Innocence Project as they have been involved in helping us design this comprehensive review, and will take on a role as we move into this final phase. So we began all of this work back in the fall of 2021. There was an important thing that happened. I think everybody in Minnesota knows about the Drew Shadeen case, and the person that was convicted was Alfonso Rodriguez. That happened a long, long time ago, but as post-conviction proceedings have gone on, one of the issues was whether or not the death penalty should be utilized in that particular case as a punishment. And as a part of that litigation in September of 2021, the judge made a ruling about the testimony that was made in that post-conviction litigation. And the judge characterized the testimony of our medical examiner as false and misleading. And whenever a judge makes that determination, it really calls into question not only what happened in that case, but we also have to call into question everything that the medical examiner has been involved with. And so we, at that time, recognized that we needed to do a really comprehensive review. And I wanted to make sure that it was independent, that we would go beyond the past reviews that we did in this office before, and really make sure that we had a thorough, comprehensive review that would actually review every case in which Dr. McGee in this county had a significant role in determining the outcome of that particular case. So in the fall of 2021, we started the work with, in the conversations with Prosecutor Center for Excellence. And I'm so glad too that, at that time when we made that decision, we actually had the capacity within this office to think through exactly what we needed to do. And a special thank you to Tammy McConkey, who is the director of our Victim Witness and Post-Conviction Justice Division. And in that, there's a post-conviction justice unit. And we also had hired at that time Michelle Montiero, who is here as well, to help us think through what we needed to do. And it was a very clear conclusion that we couldn't just limit our review. We had to look at everything. We had to engage a reputable organization that had done this work in the past, and so we were able to connect with Prosecutors for Center for Excellence, and then embark on that review. And so many of you have already reported on a number of aspects of this review. When we first, I think actually when the Attorney General's office had a particular case, we had some inquiries and we disclosed the status of that review at that time, and kind of gave you all of the information of the work that had been done. But in that fall and moving into the next year, we started with about 200. We created a universe of all of the things that we could find with regard to where Dr. McGee was listed as having done the autopsy and also listed as a witness in the particular case. And so that universe started with 215 cases. And so we embarked on this first phase to review every case within that universe. And then I think that some of you reported on kind of the subsequent phase, which was the second phase, where we had reduced that number down to about 70 some cases. And then today what we're announcing is that we are now entering into that final phase where we have identified 7 cases that need further review. The limitations that prosecutor for Center for Excellence in our office has is that we're prosecutors, we're not medical experts, we're not medical examiners. And so the next step that has been recommended to me is that we create a panel of medical experts that are independent, not connected to Minnesota, no affiliation with Dr. McGee or any of the medical examiners that work in the state, and have a panel of experts take a very deep dive into the science of what was concluded by our medical examiner in those 7 cases. I also want to make it very, very clear that those 7 cases, that, I mean, we have not made any final conclusion at all. The conclusion is that we believe that we need to have further review by medical experts on these particular cases to understand the significance of and the impact that it had on those 7 cases. And so today, I believe in your packet, you have received, I think, the report that was given to me. And if you haven't, Dennis, I didn't get it yet?
Very well.
Okay, you will get that, those written recommendations that were presented to me, as well as the written recommendations that were presented to me after the conclusion of phase 1. And that will provide some of the information in detail about the methodology that was used and how we went about starting from 215 and kind of telling you the story about how we got to 7. So our next speaker is Christine Hammond, who is the executive director and founder for the Prosecutor Center for Excellence. And they again are the organization that we have contracted with to help us conduct this review. And Chris has a team who she will introduce, and she'll talk about kind of some of the details that went into and what they have been doing during this time as we were dealing with the first phase and the second phase of this review. So Christine, I'll turn it over to you.
Good morning. I'm Christine Hammond. I'm the Executive Director of Prosecutor Center for Excellence. It is a national nonprofit that works with prosecutors all around the country on the challenging issues of the day, of which there are many. We do all kinds of things. We have national meetings, we write publications, but we also do consulting work on things like independent case review. And that is what we've done here. I do want to thank John Choi for engaging in this enterprise, because he has not only wanted to assure the public that his current cases are based on reliable and strong evidence, but he's looking backwards to make sure that the old cases are equally valid. And that is what a prosecutor should be today. So I'm very grateful that he has that point of view. But I want to introduce our team. As I said, we were Prosecutor Center for Excellence. We have no connection to Ramsey County Attorney's Office other than obviously now. We come from all over the country, and we had never heard of Dr. McGee or even, I must say, the Drew Shadeen case. So we came in kind of new to all of this. So I first want to introduce Pat Riley, a former Assistant U.S. Attorney from the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington, D.C. She played a significant part in an early review, much like this one, that looked at hair and fiber cases nationally and their impact on old cases. So she has tremendous experience in this regard. From the other side of the country, we have Mark Larson, who was chief of the criminal division in the King County Attorney's Office, which translates as Seattle. And he was head of their criminal division, so he has overseen all the criminal cases when he was in that position for decades in Seattle. We also had as a member Sophia Roach, who was a deputy assistant district attorney in San Diego, but she left us because the Attorney General in California made her the deputy director of their conviction integrity unit. So that is our team. Oh, and me, I forgot about that. I was the executive assistant district attorney in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office in New York City, where I had the great pleasure of working for what I would say the legendary Robert Morgenthau, sort of an inspiration for law and order, if that puts him in context, but that is where we're from. So we're from all over the country, and we have a more neutral perspective. So I want to talk a little bit about our process as to what we have done over this period of time. As County Attorney Choi mentioned, between Ramsey County, the Attorney General's Office, and the Innocence Project, a list of about 215 cases were assembled for review. And these cases were, I would guess, some of the most serious cases that have occurred here in Ramsey County over the past 20, 30, 40 years. So it goes back a long way. We started with some basic principles about how we would proceed. The first was we got assurances from the county attorney's office that they would give us anything we asked for, and they have certainly lived up to that. Secondly, we knew and they have agreed that they would not give us their opinions or influence our decisions in any way, and that has certainly not happened at all. We have not intentionally consulted with any of the trial lawyers or defense attorneys in these cases. That is a best practice. We didn't want to be biased in any way by others' opinions about these cases. We wanted to look at them ourselves. And then we set a standard, which I'll read to you, which has guided what we have looked for in every one of these 215 cases. And it's in the report, but I'll read it anyway. We were looking for cases where Dr. McGee's testimony or reports on cause and manner of death may have been erroneous or misstated, and his opinions may have substantially contributed to the defendant's conviction. So that is what guided our process and what we were looking for. So now we were faced with 215 cases going back decades, and we decided to divide this up into 3 phases. So the first phase, we got police complaints and appellate decisions and a few police reports, and looked at them to see what we could eliminate from our review. So the first thing we eliminated from our review was cases where cause and manner of death was not an issue. So for example, if it was a single gunshot wound to the head, cause and manner of death is really not the critical issue at the trial. There you're going to say who held the gun, what was going on. But the medical examiner testimony in a case like that is not the gravamen of the case. Another example would be driving while intoxicated, someone who kills someone in the course of driving while intoxicated. The cause and manner of death in a case like that is not the crux of the case. So that was one way we eliminated some of the cases. We also eliminated cases where the defendant had been found not guilty, where the defendant was deceased, or in a few cases, it turned out that Dr. McGee really had very little to do with the case at all. Sometimes his name was on a report, but it turned out he didn't have much to do. So that took our 215 cases down to 71, which County Attorney Choi mentioned. Now we had to start looking more deeply. And at this point, we asked for trial transcripts, grand jury transcripts, medical examiner files, crime scene photos, other evidentiary things that were going on in the trial, so it was a much, much more in-depth review. And though she's not here today, I do want to note one of the heroes of this whole enterprise is Sylvia Ares, who is a paralegal in this office. I think as all of us know who do this work, if you can't find the file, you can't do anything. So it was Sylvia who went into the basement, who went through dusty, dirty files, and went through to look at things that haven't been touched in decades to find us all that work. And so I want to thank her. I know she's not here today, but I do want to thank her for that tireless effort. It's not sexy. You're standing at a scanning machine all day long, but in any case, she was able to put that together with the tremendous leadership of Tammy McConkey and Michelle Montiero, who County Attorney Choi has already introduced, and they just did a tremendous job in getting us what we needed. Well, what they got us was hundreds of pages of documents with regard to each one of those cases. So it's very voluminous work. And so this takes a long time, especially because we knew nothing about the cases. So when you look at it, you have to understand the work, you have to figure out how everything, all the parts fit together. And so we did that work little by little between the three of us. We divided up the work, we discussed it together and so forth. And we then whittled down the 71 cases down to 64. So, and eliminated 64 of the cases that met the standard where the cause and manner of death was not instrumental in the outcome of the case. So we are now at phase 3. That means there's 7 cases left. Now, I do want to caution and say simply because there's 7 cases left, we have rendered no opinion about whether those cases are good, bad, or indifferent. We are not there yet. 2 things are going to happen in phase 3. Number 1, we will continue our review of additional paperwork that we've asked for. We're continuing to dig on the legal side of things. But because we are lawyers and not doctors, we realize that we need expert advice to come in and help us to evaluate Dr. McGee's medical autopsy reports, his testimony, and so forth. And so we participated in finding 3 medical examiners. We can't give their name because they're not under contract yet, but we hopefully that will happen soon. But again, like us, none of them are from Minnesota. None of them know Dr. McGee. They're highly respected medical examiners from 3 different parts of the nation that will come in, and they will review, each of them will review all 7 cases, and they will talk about them together and reach a decision. When they have done their work and we have completed our work, we will write our 3rd and final report. You should have 2 of our first 2 phases, and that will complete the work, hopefully, unless County Attorney Choi wants us to do something else, and we're happy to do that, and I turn it back to you.
Thank you, Christine, for that. And we'll have some Q&A as well, so all of you can have a chance to ask some questions if you have questions about phase 1 and 2 and what we're headed into in terms of phase 3. Our next speaker, Carrie Sperling from the Attorney General's office, but before Carrie comes up here, I just want to say something that's really important. One of the most important and best partners that I have in doing the work around conviction review is the Attorney General, Keith Ellison. Since becoming the Attorney General, he has made it a commitment to create a statewide post-conviction review unit in his office, and I am so grateful that we have a very deep partnership where we actually send our cases where someone is claiming innocence to the conviction review unit in the Attorney General's office, so that again, the people doing that review are independent from my office, and that partnership has been great. But obviously, as it relates to the Dr. McGee case, just given the scope and the gravity of how big of a project this is, we undertook that, ourselves by contracting with Prosecutors Center for Excellence. And since the time that Carrie has started in leading the post-conviction review unit in the Attorney General's office, they have, and again, as Christine Hammond talked about, this work is very labor intensive, it takes a lot of time, but they've actually reviewed a number of cases and have made a lot of progress, and we've worked very, very collaboratively together. So I'm just so grateful for that partnership, and also just that leadership and dedication that Attorney General Ellison has put forward in making sure that we have integrity throughout the state of Minnesota on our past convictions. That's why we do this work, because the legitimacy and the integrity of all of our convictions matter in how people trust what happens in the courtroom. And prosecutors play a very critical role to ensure that we avoid wrongful convictions, but at the same time, when we get information or we get conclusions that says that some type of testimony or some sort of process was unreliable, we have to have the courage to look backwards and to do that without fear or favor. My job as a prosecutor and Keith Ellison's job as the Attorney General, I know that we share this important value that our job is not to protect a conviction at all costs, but instead our job is to do justice and to find the truth and to do whatever it takes to ensure that we maintain that integrity and that trust in our processes and what has happened in the past. So with that, I will invite Carrie Spruill to the podium.
Thanks, John. And I can safely say that John Choi and his office here has been instrumental not only in the creation of the Conviction Review Unit at the Attorney General's office, but also in just helping us every step of the way in the process of really anything we need. Your office has been there for us, Tammy and Michelle, having wonderful teachers and helpers with any of the issues that we have, of just sounding board and otherwise. So I really appreciate all that you've done. And I think we all know that when an expert for the state provides false and misleading evidence in a criminal trial, there's a potential for a chain of injustices to follow. And that's why when Federal Judge Erickson in North Dakota in September in 2021 came out with a 262-page opinion, which if you haven't read, I highly encourage you to read it, taking to task Dr. McGee and his testimony in that case, and in fact, laid out a well-documented history of Dr. McGee providing false and inaccurate testimony in court in criminal cases. And when that happened, it was a month after the Conviction Review Unit had started accepting applications, so we were brand new. But Attorney General Keith Ellison asked this newly formed unit to review all the cases that the Minnesota Attorney General's office had prosecuted that involved McGee, and McGee's testimony was used to obtain a conviction. So as a result, we immediately prioritized a particular case that McGee had testified in, and that was the 1998 conviction of Thomas Rhodes in Candy, Ohio County. And we determined that Dr. McGee's testimony was pivotal in that case, that he had provided support for the state's theory that Mr. Rhodes had violently attacked his wife on their boat, knocking her into Green Lake, and then ramming her with this small boat until she drowned. And that led to his conviction for premeditated intentional murder. But after conviction, many medical examiners, medical experts came forward to disagree with Dr. McGee's testimony in that case. And those experts uncovered errors that Dr. McGee had made in his findings, and not one of the 10 experts that we interviewed, consulted with, found evidence that would have supported Dr. McGee's conclusion in that case that Jane Rhodes' death was the result of a homicide. And following that investigation, Thomas Rhodes' first-degree murder conviction was vacated. He still, he was released after serving well more than the maximum sentence for second-degree manslaughter, which was a lesser included of those offenses. And so after that, we decided to do the same type of a review that Ramsey County is doing. Of course, we have fewer cases, but we have relatively the same stages. The first stage being, to locate all the criminal convictions, the murder convictions from that were AGO prosecuted, and to determine whether Dr. McGee had given testimony in those cases. And that's not the simplest of tasks, which I think Ramsey County can say. So that was the first, is identify those cases, gather the materials from those cases that we needed to review. The second is the same type of process, looking through the criminal complaint, the transcripts, the autopsy report, just to determine whether the medical examiner's testimony could have been consequential in the conviction. And then once we get to a particular stage where we've reviewed all of those cases, we will be consulting with independent medical experts as necessary to determine whether McGee's testimony and opinions were accurate and appropriate. And finally, even so, it may not signal a wrongful conviction. And so in probably a very few, if any, cases, we will be required to do an in-depth fact investigation to determine whether a wrongful conviction was had. And, although we can't predict the outcome, I think we do expect very few, if any, of these convictions will be affected by this review, simply because in a vast majority of homicide cases, the cause of manner of death is obvious and not really even contested. We also, understand that just the simple fact of opening these investigations is difficult for victims and their families. And we know that if we have to engage in this in-depth fact investigation to determine whether conviction was a wrongful conviction, we will be working with victim advocates to notify survivors if we happen to do a review in one of their loved ones' cases. So to be clear, our top priority is for this review is to create transparency and justice in the system, so that people know when convictions are sound and know that there's been a review of this. Because, not one goal in our criminal justice system is met when we convict the wrong person of the wrong thing.
Thank you, Carrie. Another important decision that we made in conducting or designing this comprehensive review was to make sure that we had all perspectives considered. And so, as a part of that process, the Prosecutor Center for Excellence reached out to many of the various stakeholders, but one of those stakeholders is the Great North Innocence Project. And their perspective and their involvement in just helping us thinking through the process and some of the role that they will play in helping us really hone in on these 7 cases, to me, is very critical. It develops trust in the process that we utilize, and also gives me the assurance that any recommendation that comes to me has thought through all of the really important issues that need to be considered about what needs to be done in a particular case that we are now going to take a much deeper dive in. And so I just very much appreciate the role that the Great North Innocence Project plays in our system of justice here in the state of Minnesota and also in North Dakota and South Dakota. But the work that you do, you are a critical, important partner and stakeholder to making sure that the quality of justice is good for everybody here in our communities. So with that, I want to introduce Jim Mayer, who is the legal director for the Great North Innocence Project.
Good morning, and thank you, County Attorney Choi. My name is Jim Mayer. I'm the legal director of the Great North Innocence Project. We work to free the wrongfully convicted and to prevent wrongful convictions from occurring in Minnesota, North Dakota, and South Dakota. We are pleased to have been able to provide assistance to the Ramsey County Attorney's Office with this important project. We helped out at the beginning with identifying the universe of cases to look at, which is not as easy as you might think, even without getting into the merits of each individual case. Just figuring out what all is out there, what is our starting point, what is the universe of cases. He mentioned the 215 that they began with. We also provided some advice and assistance in terms of structuring an appropriate system for reviewing those cases, including this very important factor of having this independent panel of medical experts, people with no prior experience one way or the other with Dr. McGee, to provide an important level of information to make a better review of each case. And we look forward to providing defense-oriented feedback at this phase 3 process, to get involved, to review cases, to ask the difficult questions, to make sure all sides are being considered, and to ensure that each case gets the thorough and robust review that it deserves. One of the things that we're always doing as an organization is we are out there looking for patterns of injustice. We're looking for red flags that suggest some kind of systemic problem that could be affecting multiple individuals and therefore multiple families, multiple communities. And this important project is about recognizing one of those patterns of injustice and having the courage to look wider, to look deeper, to figure out what the extent of the damage is and to fix what can still be fixed. We have an actor in the system, former Ramsey County Medical Examiner, Dr. Michael McGee, whose testimony has been at the heart of multiple documented wrongful convictions. As has been mentioned, we have a federal judge who has observed that there has been a troubling pattern of inaccurate testimony from this player in the system, and that inaccurate testimony has led to convictions, to sentences later being tossed out when the inaccuracy of that testimony has come to light. And as I've said before, they talk about where there's smoke, there's fire. This is a case where we are beyond the smoke phase. We have seen the fire, which is why we're all standing up here. The question is how far the fire has spread, what additional damage might be out there, and how do we mitigate that harm. One of the things we run into often in our work is resistance to the idea of revisiting a past conviction. And oftentimes, courts will, for good reason, emphasize the concept or principle of finality, the importance of the finality of convictions, of putting things to rest. And I understand that. But when finality runs headlong into justice, when finality conflicts with the truth, finality should yield, and there should be no statute of limitations on the truth. We all know that the system makes mistakes. The criminal legal system makes errors, and innocent people go to prison. A healthy system, a system that is worthy of the public trust, is a system with the confidence to look for and acknowledge and remedy, and importantly, to learn from its past mistakes. And so we applaud County Attorney Choi and the Ramsey County Attorney's Office for having the courage and the integrity to expose their past convictions to the sunlight of independent scrutiny. And we're honored to play a small role in that important effort. Thank you.
Quick housekeeping before we jump into Q&A. Everything you see here, I have in reports for you, physical reports, but everything you see here, they're all going to be packaged up, pushed back out to you so you can review it if you like. I would ask one thing, as you ask questions, just identify which agency you're with so they can know who's asking the question. And I think John will probably just run point, but everyone up here is ready for the questions.
So you see the packets before the Q&A?
Yep,
Or
sure.
Luke?
Yes, Lou Ragoose from Carroll 11 News. Could you just restate what is it about these 7 particular cases that requires further review?
I'll try to answer that question to Christine or Tammy. Please chime in if I miss something. We are now at that phase where the Prosecutor Center for Excellence, in terms of like what they can do, to evaluate the work and the testimony of the medical examiner. They've identified these 7 cases as a priority to have in-depth review by a panel of medical experts, because the type of inquiry is going to be more scientific, it's going to be more medical. And so that is the main crux and the reason we go into this final phase. So after having eliminated all of these cases, right, we are now left with 7. And the conclusion, the recommendation to me is that these 7 deserve further consideration and most importantly, review by a panel of medical experts to help us kind of unpack what happened in these proceedings. So, Tammy, Christine, did I miss anything? Yeah.
I think maybe another way of saying it is, in these 7 cases, the cause and manner of death was at issue, and we need a medical expert to advise us on whether or not his conclusions about the cause and manner of death was erroneous or not.
Right.
Mr. Troy, what kind of cases are we talking about here in the 7 cases? And do the defendants know that they are among the 7?
Thank you for that question. So all 7 cases, I believe, are homicide cases that remain. One of the things that is really important to us is to protect the victims and the people who are whose case is under review. And that is a recommendation that came to us from the Great North Innocence Project, as well as Prosecutor Center for Excellence, that since this review is still pending, right, we should let people know when the time is right, if there is something to let them know of. Because when, for instance, I have been in the room when we tell a family who has lost a loved one that we're looking at their case and there could be some change, the trauma will come back. And we don't want to harm people any further. We also don't want to get hopes up for somebody who might be in prison right now when we're not even made any conclusions or we're not done with our review. One thing that we will do for sure is once we are done with our project, we're going to show our work. So all of you will have access, the public will have access. In fact, we'll create like a portal so that all of you can take a look at what cases were in that 215, what cases were in the 71, and all of that information will be provided. But it should not be done right in this really sensitive and critical time, because our value is to not harm people when they don't have to be harmed, or get people's hopes up when there's no basis necessarily to do that.
You've whittled it down.
Sorry, I'm gonna go to Mara.
Mara Godfrey with Pioneer Press. Just to clarify, the 7 cases, homicides, but specifically murder convictions in those cases, and then I have a follow-up question to that.
Yeah, they are all murder convictions, right?
Okay, and then the follow-up, I know you said it was specific to cause and manner of death, but do they also have in common, are these maybe elements of sexual assault? I saw in the previous work, it was discussed, I believe, Mother Nicole is the science of the testing related to sex assault, or is that a commonality between these cases?
I think you're referring to acid phosphatate, right? And I believe that there is one case within our 7 that has that issue.
Question, I'm sorry, I'm gonna come back.
Mike Nezzoni, Fox 9, you've whittled it down to 7 cases, but for those 200 or so other cases, what do you expect to happen if maybe a defense attorney for one of the defendants doesn't see it the same way you do and looks at it and says, Dr. McGee was involved, so that must be tainted? Do you expect legal challenges in the future?
Well, I don't, I mean, there has to be some sort of legal basis for the challenge. I don't think attorneys would just take on a case like that. But if there is that situation,